Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt, live in California. The story of your life, indeed. Last night, I'm up with very little sleep this morning because we had a blast last night. I came out to California with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt so that we could celebrate with 300 of his closest friends and staff, family, admirers, donors, supporters, Governor Pete Wilson's career. Originally, we had scheduled this at the Nixon Foundation at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda for the 30th anniversary of Pete Wilson's inauguration as governor of California in 1991. And of course, the virus got in the way, so we postponed it to April, and then we postponed it until last night, which was serendipitous from the perspective of the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, as we met for the first time on the same time I met Pete Wilson for the first time at a Pete Wilson fundraiser at Mission Bay, hosted by the San Diego Young Republicans in 1978. You know, I was the wet behind the ears Ohio kid thinking, no, this is a pretty good place. Look at all these cute girls and that one over there. And Pete Wilson was working the crowd. The only campaign out of 10, Pete went 10 for 11. And the one that he lost was the one that I won because he had an event in which I met the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. But we worked with Bob White, his longtime chief of staff, and the room was full and rocking yesterday. Great reception. The governor was there, Mrs. Wilson. Gail Wilson is a star. People who live in Washington, D.C. and who knew Gail from Pete Wilson's time in the Senate. Remember, Pete is a Marine. He's a Yaley, but we leapt over that. He's a Marine, enlisted, became an officer. His older brother led him there. His older brother was an enlisted man who said, you know, I'll break your arm if you join the Marines, and Pete did anyway, right out of Yale. After that, law school. After that, advance work for a young Richard Nixon running for California governor in 1962. That didn't work out well for President Nixon, but eventually it did for the country and for President Nixon. Then Pete went and became an assemblyman. Then he became the mayor of San Diego for 12 years. Then he became the United States Senator for 8 years. And then he became the governor of California for 8 years. He was a great governor. He was a great senator, largely responsible, along with Dan Quayle and Ronald Reagan, for the passage of Star Wars, SDI, which many credit with the collapse of the Soviet Union finally. Governor Wilson was just in fine fettle. He doesn't change. He doesn't age. He's the same guy. And there is tribute videos are a funny thing. They can either be terrible or great. This was great. The people who did little 2-minute clips, I may play it next hour, were Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State and another Ivy Leaguer Marine turned extraordinary public servant, Mitch McConnell, Master of the Senate. We had Tom Cotton and Mike Pompeo representing the next generation. Of course, Pete knows them both, admires them both. Elaine Chao, with whom Gail Wilson was close when they were in the Senate together. Constant Towers of Gavin, who many people will remember as being the social leader of Washington in the Reagan years. The Honorable George W. Bush, President Bush, had some kind and funny words for Pete Wilson. And Dan Quayle was actually the funniest of them all. I'll play that video a little bit later. And then just a tribute to him, we had a grand old time. And I'm here to tell you, don't wait around to honor people until after they've gone to their great reward in the sky. Do it when their family, friends, and colleagues can join it, because it was a blast of a party. And it was not a fundraiser. It wasn't a friend raiser. It was nothing other than come to the Nixon Library and we're just going to toast Pete. And we did. And amazingly, we had 6 speakers roughly hold to a 4-minute margin. And they made everybody laugh because they didn't go over the same bio I just gave you. Everybody knows Pete Wilson's bio, but they don't make them like that anymore. California has produced one president who had been a governor, Ronald Reagan, one president who had been a senator and a vice president, Richard Nixon, produced one governor who became the Chief Justice, Earl Warren, and only one governor who was a senator in the modern era, Pete Wilson, and also a mayor of America's finest city, San Diego. So it was a great night last night. But it went late. And I bolted out of there, and Pete was he might still be there shaking hands, because you get 300 of your old staff together, and your old friends, and your old donors, and your old supporters, and your campaign gurus, and Bob White's there. He hadn't seen people like this. Bob White's a legend in California. He's absolutely a legend, as being the man. He's sort of like, as Jim Baker was to Ronald Reagan, Bob White was to Pete Wilson. And if you don't know anything about Pete Wilson, you will not understand. A lot of people haul up a lot of different things as his greatest achievement. The single thing was with the Northridge earthquake. You know, my first big one was Northridge. and I'm clutching the kids upstairs when everything is falling apart. It was a Dwayne, were you around for Northridge? Where were you for Northridge? That was a
What, the earthquake?
yeah.
Oh, I that's where I kind of started my my career in radio, was in Los Angeles for a show on KKLA, Warren Duffy's Live from LA show. The Northridge earthquake had just happened when he went on the air.
So you see, that was genuinely disaster.
That was
Dwayne began
94,
his non-producing
95,
radio.
right?
Yeah, and that's when the 10 fell down, and people. The Interstate 10, or as we say, the 10.
No,
in
you mean the
California.
14, right? Wasn't it the 14
No,
going
the 14
to
fell
Lancaster?
down too, but the 10 fell down in West Los Angeles.
Right.
And that part of the 10 is the most traveled highway in America. And all of the experts said, well, we'll see in about 5 years. And Pete Wilson said, I have this constitution here that says I have emergency powers. And so here's the trick. Jaeger Construction, which is the biggest deal, I'm giving you a contract, and moreover, I am going to, you got to get it done in 90 days, which everyone thought was a joke. And moreover, I'm paying you $1 million or $2 million a day for every day that you finish early. Guess who finished early?
Oh yeah, put it back. Yeah.
I think he wrote it on the back of a napkin.
You put a bounty on it, and all of a sudden,
boom, it gets done.
24/7. They made it happen.
Governor,
He did that with the 14 flyover from the 5 on the way to Lancaster.
Yeah, it was a bad earthquake, but Pete handled that. He handled the riots in L.A. He did 3 strikes. He did welfare reform. He did pension reform. If they'd left it alone, California wouldn't be broke today. California would be great again. He formed these red teams. He flew all over the country and got people to tell the Democrats who are running Sacramento legislature and Willie Brown why they wouldn't open another plant in California, and they finally got medicine.
Really, the last great governor this state has had.
Absolutely.
And it's decades ago.
Absolutely. And Pete used to bang the hell out of me, and I used to bang the hell out of Pete. But I always said, not for Pete Wilson, no fetching Mrs. Hewitt. And we had a grand old time last night. And Pete Wilson is, I guess, 88. He looks like he's 60. It's not like Joe Biden. It's the other way around. Joe Biden ought to be having dinners honoring him, and Pete ought to be in the White House. In fact, Dan Quayle, I might play that later. But let me do the news. We just had a grand old time. Pete Wilson, a great man. Gail Wilson is a wonderful woman. Great First Lady and great Governor of California. Pfizer booster is now available for me. I'm 65. If you're 65 and older, wandering your CVS, show them the card that you got the vaccine 6 months ago. You don't need it before 6 months. And in a great move, finally, Rachel Walensky, the CDC director, did something right. And they had one of these endless bureaucracy advisory councils that said, we don't think we ought to really give boosters to teachers and frontline workers and doctors. And she said, you know what? Joe Biden's the president of this country, and he appointed me, and he wants everyone to get the booster, so we're giving them to frontline workers too. And they blew them all off. Good for you, Doc. I mean, this is a free country. If somebody wants the booster, go get the booster. And if you're over 65, they won't even give you a hassle about it. And it's great. You're not going to die if you get the booster. You're not going to have a bad reaction. There might be one person out there, you probably would have been run over by a truck or gotten hit by a safe falling or had Wile E. Coyote hit you in the head either. Go get the booster. Nancy Pelosi concedes last night that Mitch has beaten her. Kevin and Mitch have beaten Nancy and Chuck. She says the government funding won't lapse. So they're doing the fire drill. They passed the debt limit with a continuing resolution. And that's going to not make it through the Senate. But then they're going to go back in because they realize they're going to have to amend the budget in order to include the ability to pass the debt ceiling unilaterally. The Democrats have the power. I just love that. And they have all these, oh, look, default looms, default. It's not going to loom. By the way, the Democrats embarrassed the squad. They got so much heat from the Friends of Israel, both Republicans and Democrats. They took a $1 billion bill to the floor yesterday and rolled over the squad. AOC was crying on the floor.
120,000 Afghans were
What was that
evacuated through
about?
Kabul airport last month, and
That
still
was
the
AOC
Biden
getting it,
administration.
but she was crying on the floor, and who else was crying? Representative Jayapal was crying, and it was a day for tears for Democrats. Great day for Republicans yesterday. And the Arizona election audit says, indeed, Joe Biden won Arizona, but we knew that. Come right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate, the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather. Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it, the left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. For those considered careers in politics and
which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now. Streaming on Salem Now.
California was also celebrated last night. I interviewed Pete at the end of the evening for about 20 minutes, talked to him about his time as a Marine, his time as a senator, his time as mayor, his time as governor. And then I said, what makes California great? And he said, well, Hugh, that's easy. It's the people, especially the new people, the people who come here legally and make their lives in the Golden State. It was really quite something. Now, and he was a very competent governor. That just kept coming up. Pete is a Marine. Sees a problem, takes the problem on, fixes the problem, hires the best people. I asked him about his time in the Marine Corps. He talked about gunny sergeants and how if you listened to them, they would take care of their officers. It was really remarkable. I was just sitting there thinking, competent Pete. And then incompetent Joe. Mark Brnovich, who's the Attorney General of Arizona, was on with Hannity last night talking about Joe Biden and the border, cut number 9.
Well, clearly he's violating his oath to protect the Republican form of government in the United States. And, arguably, I'm sure there's some folks that probably think this is the equivalent of an invasion. And so we're doing what we can legally. But when it comes to aiding and abetting, the president has a lot of authority when it comes to the border. This is what he's constitutionally charged to do. He doesn't have the authority to mandate vaccines, but he does have the authority to enforce our laws, especially at the border.
Now, Jonah Goldberg on with Brett Baer last night talking about Biden, cut number 14.
Yeah, well, we heard this just tonight. The clip you had from Jen Psaki earlier in the show where she says we're weathering storms. Well, now, when you're weathering storms, you're not responsible for the weather. Storms are things that happen to you. Joe Biden says events in Afghanistan unfolded. Events at the border have unfolded as if he has no agency and no responsibility for these things. He's made choices, and we're seeing the consequences of his choices on a whole bunch of fronts. And the way the media and the way the White House spin it, it's like poor Joe Biden is like Charlie Brown being followed by a rain cloud, and he has no responsibility for what the predicament that his White House is in.
It's always pretty funny. But then I also think when you think rain cloud, the original rain cloud guy was Joe Bifstick and Little Abner. Just want you to get that on the record, Jonah, but it was a very good analogy nevertheless. You're in trouble at the Biden White House when the White House press, which is typically in the pocket of Democrats, and the president turns on you. Jen Psaki got this question yesterday, cut number 13 from the White House press yesterday.
President Biden ran on a promise to use government to help people and that he would be able to wield the powers of government effectively. But we've seen on a range of issues, whether it's the pandemic, immigration, Afghanistan, some missteps or places where the government trying to do its best hasn't necessarily been good enough. So what do you say to a voter who might be saying, I thought Biden was going to know how to run this government, but now we're looking at a potential government shutdown in a week and a default on U.S. debt?
I would say that every president is elected to weather storms and navigate crises, and they come to every presidency. And if you look at all of the things that you loaded into that question, all issues that are happening, of course, currently, the president has been clear that he wanted to end a 20-year war in Afghanistan. He did exactly that. That's something I would say the American public broadly supports. We've certainly acknowledged that there are aspects.
For a second, it was really the question that mattered to me about ending that 20-year war. Bad news is going to come out of Afghanistan pretty soon. John Androsik yesterday, who was out there playing Blood on My Hands at every concert and getting standing ovations, tweeted yesterday, Rolling Stone. Has Rolling Stone covered the murder of Afghan folk swinger Falwell Andarabi, who was shot and killed by the Taliban for his artistic expression? I can't find anything. If anyone deserves to be on the cover, it's this guy. Meanwhile, the Taliban announced yesterday, Mullah Nuruddin Turabi, that the executions will pick up again. And the hardline movement will once again carry them out, amputations of hands, and that the world should not interfere with the Afghan government. Everyone criticized us for the punishments in the stadium, but we have never said anything about their laws and their punishments. No one will tell us what our laws should be. We will follow Islam, and we'll make our laws on the Quran. So, Joe Biden weathered that storm by leaving a country in pitch darkness, and I hear some very bad things coming from the Americans and the LPRs that we left behind. They're invisible to you right now. They're not invisible to me. Say a prayer for them. They're still there. They're still suffering. Many are hiding, and some have been caught. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. It is Friday, so we do movies and football on Friday because, after all, Fridays are Fridays on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the death. So you guys got me here. There's a differentiation here. There are people that are actually dying from COVID itself. Okay? Got it. And then there's people that may be dying of some other condition, but they may have tested positive for COVID. Perhaps they were even asymptomatic. Nonetheless, these people are getting registered as COVID-19 deaths when it isn't COVID that caused it. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There are some people that have some conditions, and COVID can worsen those conditions, and maybe make their demise come on more quickly. So we do have to be fair in that instance. But as health officials have failed to make those key distinction points when it comes to the government's tally of COVID deaths. This is from Brenda Brock. Brenda Brock is the coroner for Grand County, Colorado. And she told Cheryl Atkinson that in November, listen to this, and this isn't a one-off. She told Cheryl Atkinson that back in November, she processed a murder-suicide case. The very next day, that murder-suicide case showed up on the state website as a COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the death. So you guys got me here. There's a differentiation here. There are people that are actually dying from COVID itself. Okay? Got it. And then there's people that may be dying of some other condition, but they may have tested positive for COVID. Perhaps they were even asymptomatic. Nonetheless, these people are getting registered as COVID-19 deaths when it isn't COVID that caused it. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There are some people that have some conditions, and COVID can worsen those conditions, and maybe make their demise come on more quickly. So we do have to be fair in that instance. But as health officials have failed to make those key distinction points when it comes to the government's tally of COVID deaths. This is from Brenda Brock. Brenda Brock is the coroner for Grand County, Colorado. And she told Cheryl Atkinson that in November, listen to this, and this isn't a one-off. She told Cheryl Atkinson that back in November, she processed a murder-suicide case. The very next day, that murder-suicide case showed up on the state website as a COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she? This is what she's upset about.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way, and I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, and we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
This is like right out of a comic book or a movie or a novel about an inept, comical, egregiously corrupt administration. You're going to investigate the Border Patrol agent on the horse? What are you still looking for the root cause of the problem, Kamala? Are you still looking for that? She's a little bit like O.J. Simpson looking for Nicole's killer on the golf courses of Las Vegas. He's still on that search, for the real killer of Nicole and Ron.
Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America's Hugh Hewitt. It's a Friday on the Hugh Hewitt Show. That means it's time first for the movies with Sonny Bunch. He, across the movie aisle fame, the Dispatch goes to the movies. Not the Dispatch, the Bulwark goes to the movies. Good morning, Sonny Bunch. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Hugh?
Well, good. You warned me off from Cry Havoc, but I liked it anyway. So I'm not sure whether or not to trust you this week, but have you got anything for us?
Wait, what did I warn you off of that you liked?
You weren't very excited about Cry Macho.
Oh, Cry Macho, yeah. I mean,
I liked it.
It's fine. It's fine. My big problem with this movie is that I don't believe Clint Eastwood
on a Bronco
at that age doing a lot of things in that movie. I mean, he's just too old for it.
I thought of that last night when we were honoring Pete Wilson on the 30th anniversary of the occasion of his first year as governor, and there was a picture of he and Clint, and it was 30 years ago. Clint could have done that Bronco. So let's forget about Cry Macho and tell me instead, what do we see this weekend, Sonny?
Well, there are a couple of things in the theater you could go check out. There's a new movie about Tammy Faye Baker called The Eyes of Tammy Faye, starring Jessica Chastain as Tammy Faye Baker and Andrew Garfield as Jim Baker, which is kind of interesting. I don't think it's very good. The movie doesn't really work for me because it's kind of structured. So again, it's about Tammy Faye Baker. It's about her life and her kind of rise and fall and the rise and fall of televangelism. Just as a general matter. And again, I don't think the movie is very good because it is kind of structured like a musical biopic, Hugh. It's like, one of these movies that like Bohemian Rhapsody or Ray or whatever. There's a million of them. Respect, which is in theaters right now.
Sure.
There's a million of these movies where you have a very basic structure to it.
Elvis Presley, yep. Rise, fall, rise again. Yep.
Right, exactly. It's you have a rough childhood, which leads to somebody wanting to become a performer, which leads to them finding success, which leads to them becoming addicted to drugs.
Billie Holiday, you betcha.
And it's a very, very predictable structure. And for some reason, the filmmakers have decided to follow that structure exactly for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. And again, this is so predictable that it's almost weirdly like a parody. It's almost like a parody of these sorts of things. So again, I don't think the movie really works. Jessica Chastain tries real hard in it. She has a lot of what I would describe as theater kid energy, which is to say that she is acting. She's doing a lot of acting in this movie. She's very expressive and
as was Tammy Faye.
Into it.
As was Tammy Faye.
As with Tammy Faye, but that's why it works. I mean, that's why her performance here works and doesn't just feel like a bundle of nerves and energy like it
High School Musical. Yeah, no High School Musical.
So, look, I can't really recommend this movie. I don't think it's great, but she is interesting in it. I like Andrew Garfield in it. The weirdest performance is Vincent D'Onofrio as Jerry Falwell, who's playing Jerry Falwell almost like he's Dick Cheney. He's very clipped and very stentorian. It's a very weird it's a very weird performance from him. But you know, I again can't really recommend this movie. It might be worth checking out if you're if you remember this period in history, just to kind of see how Hollywood wants to portray it in theaters, which obviously is not
100%
terribly.
Is there anything else though we can see? Now the Browns are playing the Bears on Sunday, so I don't need, and the Ohio State Buckeyes are playing the Akron Zips tomorrow. So I got alternatives if there's nothing to see.
Football.
Yeah.
Well, I like there's a movie out now. It actually came out last weekend, but it didn't screen, at least for me, for critics, called Cop Shop, Hugh, and I've seen the preview. It stars Gerard Butler as this kind of hitman named Bob Vidic. He is he is chasing Frank Grillo, whose character is Teddy Moretto, and Teddy is a fixer for the Las Vegas mob / casinos. They're kind of one and the same, as we all know, or at least used to be. This movie is slightly anachronistic in that regard. But so this is directed by Joe Carnahan, who directed The Grey. He directed the A-Team remake, reboot, whatever, for movies 10 years ago or so. And he's made a bunch of movies I actually really like. And I'm kind of surprised that this movie has gotten so buried. It hasn't gotten a ton of promo. He is not doing any press for it. Apparently, he and Frank Grillo were kind of mad about how the studio cut Frank Grillo's character. But I like it a lot. Is there a lot of
Las Vegas? I love Las Vegas movies. I love Nevada movies. I was talking about Nevada yesterday. Adam Laxalt, their former attorney general, is running for Senate and should win. And they, whenever you do that, the grifters in Las Vegas come out and attack the good guys. And so some of the grifters came out and attacked at Adam. You know, Vegas is just full of grifters. Everybody's on the take. And so some of them came out and attacked Adam Laxalt yesterday. And then the former journalist, now Flack, John Ralston, came out and attacked Adam. I think he's just on the Democrats' team. But Las Vegas, you turn over any rock and people come out. Is there Vegas through this movie? I go see every Vegas movie.
Yeah, it's set in Nevada, and there is a scene early on that is in a casino. It's very funny. I don't want to spoil it, but it kicks off the movie in a very entertaining and amusing way. But it's not really a Vegas movie. It's more like Rio Bravo, is how I would describe it, or Assault on Precinct 13. So what essentially happens in this movie is that Frank Grillo's character, Teddy Moretto, he gets himself arrested on purpose to try and avoid being killed by the people who are out to get him. But they all wind up in the same jail with him, and it's a battle to survive, to kind of make it through the night. Again, it is set in Vegas. It has a lot of kind of Vegas trappings, corruption, and like I said, there is a scene in a casino, and there is a lot of talk about the Vegas polls and the grifters and all of the palms that need to be greased. But I would not really describe it as a Vegas movie. This is not Ocean's 13, right? Or Ocean's 11. This is
But it's a good solid B.
It's a solid B plus movie. It's a B movie, is what it is. I mean, it is a big action adventure movie. I want to specifically shout out two actors in this. Toby Huss. I don't know if you know who Toby Huss is. I do not. But he's a great character actor. He's been in a ton of stuff. But he plays this kind of psychopathic killer with a southern accent that is just really. He's a very funny character. I love him in this. And Alexis Louder, who I've never seen before in anything, but she plays the good cop, and she just has a steely gaze to her. She's got a backbone. I love her in this movie. But if it should be playing near you because it's in 3,000 screens somehow.
Well, I'm telling you, Sonny, you sold me on this, and so I've got a movie to see. Sonny Bunch has done his job. Give 5 charts. By the way, did you review it in Across the Movie Aisle?
We didn't review it because again we kind of weren't sure when it was coming out. We weren't 100% sure what was going on with it.
Is it in the Bulwark Goes to the Movies?
Well, I'm writing a fairly longish piece about it today. And Joe Carnahan's work in general. I'll tweet it out at some point this morning once it goes up. But look for that, folks.
I will. Well, Sonny Bunch, as always, you've given me something to work with, and I appreciate it, my friend. Follow Sonny on Twitter at Sonny Bunch. Watch both of his podcasts or listen to both his podcasts, Across the Movie Aisle and The Bulwark Goes to the Movies. Sonny Bunch, thank you. I have to do a market report brought to you by our friends at Birch Gold. Now, a lot of you will spend this weekend worried about the collapse of the Chinese real estate market because Evergrande bondholders are left in the dark as crucial deadline. I mean, if you look at the Wall Street Journal today and you look at the Financial Times, you look anywhere, and the serious money people are holding their breath. And yesterday, although the Dow went up 500 points, the NASDAQ went up 155 points. Who knows what's going to happen today? Everything's red in Europe, and I have no idea what's going to happen today. I will tell you the 10-year Treasury ticked up to 1.41%, and gold went up to 17.55. Because if this Chinese real estate scam falls apart, and that's what it is, it's just a Chinese real estate scam, a lot of financial towers are going to come tumbling down in Beijing, and Xi is using it. The dictator Xi, the great Xi, is going around arresting people left and right. There's another story in my stack of people that he's arresting left and right. He's going to arrest everyone. He's just arresting everybody, and he's going to collapse the financial network of China. So a lot of people are sweating it out. So look, if you don't want to sweat stuff out, if you want to make sure you have some assets that endure through everything, then go and get yourself some gold. And do it through Birch Gold. You go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. They will sell you gold direct. That's who I buy my gold maple leafs from. So I put them in my safety deposit box whenever my price point gets hit. But if you can't afford to buy gold, then roll over a portion of your IRA, your 401k. Remember, wealth is made in concentration. It's protected by diversification. Own some precious metals. Put them in a vault. Let Birch Gold run it. I'll send you a free information kit over at hughgold.com. Let me also remind you, time for relieffactor.com. Relieffactor.com. Friday means the weekend. The weekend doesn't mean a long run tomorrow. It's the end of my week of sloth. I got to go back to the D.C. tomorrow, and that means flying with the wind at our back, which is always good. So it turns a 7-hour airplane flight into a 5-hour, but I still hate airplanes. Luckily, I've got my relieffactor.com, and when I take it in the shower, I feel great. Now, nobody came up to me last night at the Pete Wilson Fest. We called it Wilson Fest. We should have called it Pete-a-Palooza, but it was really about both Pete and Gail, so it wouldn't be right to call it Pete-a-Palooza, but Wilson Fest. No one brought up their relief factor because it wasn't an event that I did, but I should have taken some for the governor. He doesn't need it, though. Pete's bouncing around. He's 88. He ought to go give lessons on energy to Joe Biden because he was in just great shape last night. He might be taking relief factor. For all I know, Pete Wilson might be taking relief factor. He's a terrific guy. I am flying. I've already read Enemy at the Gates, so I can't read the Vince Flynn novel, Enemy at the Gates. It's the new Mitch Rapp thriller written by Kyle Mills. You heard Kyle on the show this week, so I can't read that. I can take my relieffactor.com, but I cannot read that. I've got to read something else on the airplane tomorrow or watch the episodes of Ted Lasso that I haven't seen yet. And I want to remind you, if you want to go back in the Wayback Machine, if you find the search engine widget over at HughHewitt.com, you can find everything I've ever said about Pete Wilson on the show. Maybe. Most of it. Some of it. The search engine is really a good thing to have, and it is a great thing if you are looking for a particular interview that I've done and you remember in your mind that I talked to somebody and you want to go find it. That's why we have the search engine window over there. I do want to make sure that I tell you that Germany is upset with this, which means that the AUKUS Security Pact is a good thing. France and Germany are upset about the Indo-Pacific Security Pact between the U.S., UK, and Australia over nuclear submarines. If Germany and France are mad at us, that means it's actually effective against Russia and China. So we're going to get India and Japan. They're the new NATO. They're NATO 2.0. They're the one that matters going forward because the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese People's Liberation Army and the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy has got to be, I told you, Xi's going crazy. He's even jailing the booze baron who made the famous Mao drink that he loved. Keep your eye on that place. Coming right back, Doug. Lemerises joins me for our Football Friday segment. College football ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah, for a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is to secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this, and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of Green are looking at him as their boss saying, wait a minute. We're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
There is a way that this could all be solved.
Okay, hang on.
That actually Republican states have the ability to solve this if they wanted to. Put Mayorkas aside, put the Biden bashing aside. I'm kind of tired of that, aren't you? I'm fatigued with governors going on cable television and saying, Biden regime is terrible and we need... Okay, enough of that, okay? Do something about it. And in fact, Texas showed that you can do something about it if it gets so bad for this.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in California. About to fly back tomorrow. I'll have to watch the Akron, Ohio State game on the plane. I hope I can get enough bandwidth on that. Joined by Doug Lemerises. He, along with Shahan Jayaraja, host the College Football Playoff Podcast Show. And I got to tell you, the College Football Playoff Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever they're available. And I really recommend the College Football Playoff Podcast. I really do. The playoff show is terrific. However, Doug also hosts Buckeye Talk, which is I'm addicted to. And I'm now very into this look behind the sports journalism world that you did a deep dive of 4 hours on, Doug. We'll come to the most important thing that happened in college football last week and what will happen this week. But that's really something. Anyone interested in sports journalism, having Stevens say this is very different from the Kent State Journalism School was something. Good idea, well executed.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a world, Hugh, where people, they get on message boards and they share information, and people sometimes, it's almost like gossip a little bit. and it's an important part of college football. And you can hear rumors, and are players going to be out and that kind of thing. But it's not the same as writing for a newspaper or a website, but it's a huge part of college sports. It's interesting. It can be a little, I don't know, on the edge sometimes, but it's reality. And so, yeah, it is a little bit of a journalism lesson for all of us, but it's a little bit almost like gossip magazines, but it can be really interesting.
I strongly recommend. Ohio State's got like a dozen different sites that follow it, and Buckeye Talk Podcast is probably the most popular with Doug, Nathan, and Steven. But they've done this 4-hour deep dive into one super team's universe. It's like the Marvel universe of Ohio State football. I recommend it to you. But let's get the College Football Playoff Show podcast. What was the most important thing that happened last week, Doug? Lemerises.
Well, again, Hugh, the audience needs to know this. I came on last week and talked about this great quarterback from Florida who had a chance to maybe beat Alabama. He didn't play. He had a hamstring. He didn't play. They played the other guy. But Florida still almost beat Alabama, and the interesting thing was Alabama looked a little vulnerable, and Alabama never looks vulnerable. So Alabama's not going to lose this week, but now that makes us look ahead to 2 weeks from now. They're going to play maybe the best quarterback in the country in Matt Corral of Ole Miss. So Alabama survived last week, but now I'm very intrigued about what it's going to look like the next few weeks for Alabama.
You know, if you talk to a Mississippi fan anywhere in the country, they'll always say, just wait until last century, because Ole Miss is not mentioned, had not mattered in 20 years. And I heard the podcast this week, so I got to start watching Ole Miss again because this quarterback sounds interesting.
Yes.
What is the most important college football game other than Ohio State and Akron, which does not feature C.J. Stroud? I hope there's an emergency Buckeye talk on that. What is the most important game other than Ohio State Akron?
Well, in the college football world now, Hugh, players can transfer and play immediately. Back several years ago and for a long time, you had to sit out a year when you transferred. So this week, Notre Dame and Wisconsin are playing in Soldier Field in Chicago, and the Notre Dame quarterback is Jack Cohn, who used to be the Wisconsin quarterback.
Huh.
So this is a really interesting head-to-head situation. You don't see it all that much. Jack Cohn was a veteran quarterback at Wisconsin. There was a younger quarterback named Graham Mertz who kind of came in and took over. So now they're playing each other head-to-head. Notre Dame remains in our playoff conversation, but they've won 3 games by really close margins, and this time Wisconsin's favored by about a touchdown. So it's kind of a revenge game, or at least seeing his old friends, for Notre Dame quarterback Jack Cohn. And if Notre Dame wants to stay in the playoff mix, they've got to win this game. They haven't looked great defensively the first 3 weeks. So a big neutral site game in Chicago.
I thought you guys were close. You and Shahan, for the benefit of the audience that have not yet subscribed to the College Football Playoff Show podcast, and you should. The College Football Playoff Show podcast is very entertaining. The texters, along with Shahan and Doug, have up to 12 teams in the hunt for the playoffs, and they can boot someone out every week. They do boot someone out every week. I thought you were going to boot Notre Dame this week on the strength, or actually lack of strength, in their 3 tepid wins, but they hung on by their fingernails. They're not going to survive a close game with Wisconsin, I don't think, given the tenor of your voice.
No, it's tough. I mean, they've played really tight games with Florida State. They almost lost to Toledo the other week, so Notre Dame, we thought they'd have a great defense this year. They have one of the best defensive players in the country in Kyle Hamilton, but they just haven't been that team. And so it'll be really interesting. They might need Jack Cohn, former Badger, to save them, which is just a fascinating storyline. But it's part of what college football is. You can transfer and be in another team in a year.
You know, I got to go back and say very quickly, you paid a sideways compliment to the Tulsa quarterback last week, compared him to the old USC quarterback, Mark Sanchez. And so the guy took his helmet off. You were absolutely right. He was a central casting Oklahoma from down in the Plains States. He had a pretty good game, Doug. They scared us.
Oh, no, the Ohio State defense is having lots of quarterbacks scare right now. But again, as you said, Ohio State, they're 7 touchdown favorites against Akron, but their starting quarterback has a sore shoulder. They're going to play some other guys. So at least something interesting to watch at Ohio State this week.
Doug Lemerises, thank you. Go watch the college football playoff show. The podcast is amazing. And Buckeye Talk, of course. Doug Lemerises talks to you next week. Don't go anywhere, America. It's Friday. The Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show rolls along next.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are two things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policeman, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah. That's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America. We're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I saw the pictures. They were just grabbing them with their hands, and the reins are used to turn the horses. I was like, what? But this is what the left does. They fool people. If you're, okay, so I'm like, okay. If I'm on that border is being overwhelmed. I'm going a little crazy, okay? I'm going a little crazy, so maybe they got a little crazy, but Maybe, you know what I mean? If we were in that situation. But no, come to find out, it was just another left-wing attack, another left-wing fiasco made to look like you heard Ilhan Omar saying that our country is systemically racist. Meanwhile, her black behind is on TV. Her black behind is in Congress shaping our nation into an anti-Semitic country. But we're systemically racist. Meanwhile, this bigot is in Congress shaping our nation and turning our nation into a bunch of racists. I kid you not. I feel like every day I come into this studio, I feel like I'm checking the corner. Where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I feel like I'm being punked by the Democrats every day. Out there. Let's go to Joel in San Diego, California.
Yeah, man, 1996, everyone forgets 900 FBI files were found in the Clinton White House.
Good point.
And they've been in the pocket of the FBI for years.
Joe?
So this thing goes deep. We need a new Untouchables to be reincarnated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I feel dumb asking this question. Is there any way to vet 120,000 Afghan quote-unquote refugees if they don't have any ID papers, Tom?
No. And let me tell you something. Let's just look at the facts. It takes, especially an immigrant visa, it takes 18 to 24 months to vet.
Yeah.
Right? Because CIS gets it, they send it to the chief of mission at the embassy. He has it for, at least 12, 13 months, and they go through all the Afghan records, right? It's a birth certificate legitimate. Is a passport legitimate? They got to go through all these certain documents and check numerous databases, including DOD databases. Is there any derogatory information on this person? Before this happened in Afghanistan, the regular process took 18 and 24 months. And here's the fact. 84% of SI visa requests were denied.
Wow.
And that's when they had time to actually vet them. So now they're trying to vet within days or weeks when they got no access. There is no chief of mission. There is no embassy over there. I don't know where the operator is. Do they have access to Afghan records anymore? Does the Taliban have it? How do they know what's a legitimate passport? Where do all the records for the Afghan government go? So we got no staff over there, no insight over there. We don't have access to Afghan paperwork. And I talked to people here at Dulles, law enforcement, that said some of these people show up as absolutely zero ID. How the hell can you possibly vet them? If you got an 84% denial rate when they have time, that tells you how full of fraud this whole system is.
So the idea that we are still safe, that this isn't being exploited by terrorists, that's just garbage, right, Tom?
We are scary unsafe.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
These powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
The front page of the New York Times, the alleged paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live in California. Last night at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, we honored Pete and Gail Wilson. Great public servant. You just got to listen to the tribute roll. You should lead a life that has people say this about you. We begin with Mitch McConnell.
While Washington, D.C. is a place where everybody refers to everybody else as my friend, it can be deceptively hard to form real and lasting friendships in a place like Congress. That's why Elaine and I have been so grateful to have Pete and Gail Wilson as true friends for many years now. Pete was already in the Senate when I arrived in 1985. I liked him right away. He was a principled leader and effective legislator across a number of subjects. But of course, 8 years here in the upper chamber was just one step on Pete's illustrious career in public service. He helped right California's fiscal ship and stood up for things like public safety. Imagine that. So my friend, I'm sorry I couldn't be there to celebrate in person. Congratulations on this occasion and on your remarkable record of accomplishment.
I was lucky enough to get to know Pete and Gail when I was just starting my government service. Pete always welcomed diversity in the party, the government, and our country. He has always been a stalwart champion of the contributions that immigrants have made to this country. He and Gail took notice of me, mentored me, and encouraged me. I am only one of the multitudes of people that Pete and Gail have fostered and brought along in all different kinds of positions. A true patriot, Pete has dedicated his life to improving the lives of all Californians and Americans. I also want to give a big shout out to his beloved Gail and former First Lady of California. Devoted to one another, theirs is a true love story. California and America are blessed to have these two leaders who have devoted their lives to improving the country in which we live.
To me, Pete, you always have been and always will be a very promising young man since I'm 3 years older than you. The two of us have shared similar life paths together. We both attended Ivy League schools. We both graduated from public law schools. We both served in the United States Marine Corps before practicing law and then entering public service. But I have to quickly add that you had much greater success as a candidate for public office than I did. You won a total of 10 elections to 4 separate offices: California General Assembly, Mayor of San Diego, U.S. Senator, and finally, Governor of the Golden State. Meanwhile, I lost the only time my name was ever on a ballot, when Texas voters chose someone else as their Attorney General in 1978, which was a good thing for me in the long run because it made possible my public service in Washington. And so I salute the milestone you are celebrating today, Pete, your illustrious career in politics and public service, and particularly our long and enduring friendship.
When you were in Sacramento, Pete, it was truly the golden age of California, because you always had the courage to do what you believed was right. Which reminds me of one of my favorite stories. When you were in the Senate and just recuperating from an emergency appendectomy at Bethesda, the phone rang at midnight. It was the Commander-in-Chief, Ronald Reagan, and he said, "Pete, I need your vote to pass his balanced budget." And without thinking twice, you said, "Sir, I'm ready to roll." And roll you did, still in your PJs, attached to an IV, from gurney to ambulance to wheelchair and onto the Senate floor, where you received a standing ovation from everyone. And you said, "Mr. President, what's the question?" Oh, Pete, you may have lost your appendix, but not your sense of humor. Pete, you truly deserve this evening's award. Champion of the American Dream. because you are the American dream.
Pete, I wish I could thank you in person for your storied career. For decades, you fought to keep California a place where Americans can still pursue the American dream. As a Marine, you know that you only take fire when you're over the target. And over the years, you've certainly got a lot of incoming. But when things get tough, no one fights harder than a Marine. Pete, you're a champion of the conservative movement, and you've made our nation and your state proud. You guided California through some tough times and stood for what was right, even if it was unpopular. You are the gold standard of the Golden State. History already judges you kindly, and it will continue to do so in the years to come. I wish you and Gail all the best. Congratulations on your lifetime of service to our country.
Governor Wilson's congratulations on this big night. It's wonderful to have a chance to say thank you. Thank you for your service to America. As a Californian, someone who grew up in that amazing place, to watch your public service as a Marine, as the mayor of San Diego, I grew up in Santa Ana, and then as the governor, to watch you lead, to do it with grace and kindness and real authority and power. America and California are better off for all that you have done for it. This is a much-deserved award. Congratulations to you. God bless you, and may you continue to serve America.
Pete, you remember the first time that we got to know each other? Back in 1983, pal. That's a long time ago. You just joined the Senate, joined the Senate Armed Services Committee. You and I were seatmates right next to each other for 8 years there. And I remember the first Codel that we went on. It was in 1983. Bill Cohen was the leader of the Codel. Bill went on to be Secretary of Defense, as everyone knows. We went to Israel. You and I went to Lebanon, then to Rome, and then we went to the Munich National Security Conference. During that trip and at that conference, I could see, how hard-working you were, diligent, prepared. You hit the ground running. I was very impressed. We've been friends ever since. You went on to be governor after the Senate for 2 terms. So I've been thinking about this. You've been state assembly, mayor, senator, governor. How about president of the United States? Not too late. Gail, you'd be in, wouldn't you? I'd be in. Get some folks there to be in. Why not? We need good, solid leadership like Pete Wilson offered the state of California for many years. We need that for our country. So Pete, give it a thought. Give it a go. Have a great evening.
Greetings to those honoring Pete Wilson with the Champion of the American Dream Award. Pete was a strong governor of California and a fine United States Senator. Pete is an exemplary citizen of the United States, a fine public servant and a friend. Laura and I send our very best wishes to everyone involved with the Nixon Foundation, and God bless.
When you can get that kind of lineup, Dan Quayle, Mitch McConnell, Tom Cotton, Mike Pompeo representing the future, the past, everyone in there, Elaine Chao representing for the old Senate. When Mitch McConnell and Elaine came to D.C., Pete and Gail were there. It was just a remarkable tribute to public service, and I'm glad I got a chance to play that for you. And it's very cool that breaking news occurred when I was playing that. Chuck Grassley, the same age as Pete Wilson, who served in the Senate with Pete Wilson, announced he's running for the Senate again. Bravo, Chuck Grassley. Lock that one down for the R column. Chuck Grassley will be, of course, reelected. He'll make his 88-county tour in Iowa. Chuck Grassley running for reelection. It just goes to show if Pete had decided to stay, he came to help California. If he decided to stay in the Senate, he'd still be there. Even though California has changed, Pete was the leading light on the Defense Committee as Dan Quayle was talking about their Codel to Israel and Lebanon. I'm glad you got a chance to hear that. If you want to see the longer biopic that was done by Frank Gannon, that's linked over at HughHewitt.com. I'll be right back, America. Back to the news on this Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show, West Coast.
Curious about what you're missing in the universe? The After Show? 21 years of Hugh Hewitt shows on demand? Go to www.huniverse.com right now, where it's only 99 cents to join for the first month. www.huniverse.com.
Organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
The front page of the New York Times, the alleged paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what the New York Times is covering today. The paper of record. They're also covering Biden's speech at the United Nations, which we will cover a little bit. There's not that much there to cover, as he read from a teleprompter. Instead, we're going to cover the imminent invasion happening in our country. We already have had 1.8 million people illegally cross into our country this year. 1.8 million. Cutting in line, border jumping, breaking the law. These are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals. This is designed disorder by the Biden regime. And only thanks to Fox News stumbling across this and publicizing it do we even know this is happening. And in some of the coverage on Tucker Carlson's wonderful show, there was something that was said by Bill Magulin that I think was quite revealing. Something that I think exposed how this could actually be solved. That many people are upset that the southern border is wide open, but we feel powerless. We feel helpless. In fact, we are told that unless the Biden regime steps up and does something, there's nothing we can do.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world.
I love that. We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. That's not true. We've ended 20 years of American troops in Afghanistan. We have not ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. I wish we did. The Taliban has taken over. That is exactly that would be like saying if Churchill had decided not to fight Hitler any longer. Well, we've ended all these years of conflict with Germany. Except when you have tyrants in charge, violent tyrants, you have not ended conflict. You have only ended your role in it. It shows the statement is fascinating. It's so incorrect that it really demands explanation. Why would somebody say something so incorrect? We have not ended 20 years of conflict. We have ended 20 years of American engagement, or at least direct engagement. And that is because basically most people, and I even include a lot of conservatives, really don't give a damn about Afghans. Something I've never quite understood. I am forthright about this. I think America should be the world's policeman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. I want to tell you something to reassure you about your influence as a radio personality.
Oh.
9 out of 10 of your listeners may disagree with you about the Republican cave, but I've been humming Red Rubber Ball since Wednesday. Tarzana Joe says if she hears I'm not the only starfish in the sea one more time, I will be. Okay, let's get on with the poem. With the country in an uproar and big choices looming large, the left has just discovered that they're the ones in charge. They have the House and Senate and the Oval Office, too. Funny how they can't enact the things they said they'd do. I have but little sympathy for all the left's frustrations. They'll either have to raise the debt or lower expectations. But like their peerless leader, that's President Barack, confronted with unpleasant facts, they all react with shock. I only learned about it when I read it in the news. I think that's just a tactic that they've all begun to use. The crisis at the border just shows their deep divisions, with Kamala seems unaware who's making the decisions. Find the ones responsible. The VP wants to know. Well, all she really needs to do is have a talk with Joe. Issue angry statements, grumble, growl, and glower, but it's tough to blame your rivals when you're the ones in power. I suppose that leadership thought every vote's a yes, but there's no such unanimity unless you're with the press. If you can't get the building built when you have all the tools, you may be in high office, but you only look like fools. That's Who's in Charge Here, or Where's Al Haig When You Need Him, by Tarzana Joe.
That is excellent, Joe, and it will be posted, I assume, at TarzanaJoe.com.
Yes.
And would you tell Tarzana Johanna for me that, hey, it's going to be all right. Hey, the worst is over now.
No. Stop.
Now, by the way, commission business. Have you fixed your bugs? Can people come to TarzanaJoe.com or email you at TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com?
It's an odd bug. It seems that people with Apple laptops can't reach me. So we're working on it still.
That's a lot of people.
I know.
So how do they get a poem commissioned?
They write to TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com or TarzanaJoe@Hotmail.com. Or just wander around Tarzana till you see a guy on the street corner reading poetry and grab that guy. It's okay.
I think I heard a little bit of your work in a wedding poem 2 weeks ago, and it was quite brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Never a disappointed customer. Never a disappointed customer. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
Now, I have to very quickly explain something that happened yesterday. It was a fun little thing. John Ralston's a good guy. I've known John forever. He's a flack for various Nevada industries, and he runs a newsletter. He used to be a journalist. So John is a hologram as well. I've never been to Las Vegas without running into John. And so yesterday, it's got nothing to do with John. Yesterday, I mentioned that I'd had a meeting, coffee with Adam Laxalt the day before. Adam's an old friend, former Attorney General of Nevada, is going to be the next senator. And then Rick Scott, Senator Scott, who runs the NRSCC, was on the program yesterday, as he is once a month, to review the map. Everyone knows I'm a Republican. I'm a partisan. Well, John Ralston's a partisan, too. So I have on Adam Laxalt's buddy, Rick Scott, who's a senator, and we talk about the Laxalt race. And by the way, if you want to support Adam Laxalt, you go to adamlaxalt.com and give him a contribution. Every time John Ralston attacks him now, I'm going to bring up Adam Laxalt and ask you for $50 or $100 for Adam Laxalt. And John Ralston steps on this rake. I haven't said anything about John Ralston. I like John Ralston. I really do. And he's just a flack, and he's a Democrat, and he's supporting Cortez Masto, the Democratic senator. And so John comes out of nowhere and attacks me for doing, I can't remember what he said. He said some kind of disparaging thing about me, a suck-up interview with Rick Scott, and that Adam Laxalt was disqualified because he participated in the election challenge. By the way, that would make Al Gore unpatriotic as well. If anyone followed the law, and Adam Laxalt did, in challenging the vote, and then stopped when the vote came down from the Nevada Supreme Court, then Al Gore is just guilty as well. But John Ralston isn't really saying that Adam Laxalt's disqualified. He's just pitching for the Democrat because he's a Democrat. John Ralston's a partisan. But most of the legacy media covers John as though he's not a partisan. So I just want you to know, he hates Adam Laxalt. He outed himself as a partisan yesterday. So when you see Ralston reports bagging on Adam Laxalt, always remember John is in the Democratic camp. John puts on the blue jersey, I put on the red jersey, and we're both partisans. Now go and contribute to AdamLaxalt.com. I'll be right back, America. It's Dante here.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands. Kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
How many years did you have at ICE and DHS?
Just under 35.
35 years. In your service of almost 4 decades, was there any locale in America where 15,000 illegal aliens were under a bridge? That's my first question.
Absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Okay. Second question. Was there ever a case where a bus was taken over by illegal immigrants and the illegal immigrants escaped off the bus in mass numbers?
No, absolutely not.
So those two things alone surely would count as a crisis.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America. This is not we're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback with reins, trying to pretend, making this effort to make you think that Border Patrol agents are slave masters, whipping the poor Haitian people who are just here looking for a better life. There needs to be an investigation about the Border Patrol agent on horseback, as if the Border Patrol agents aren't already bone-weary, overwhelmed, threatened, and in an impossible job. How'd you like to be married to a Border Patrol agent today? How'd you like to have a dad, a mom, a loved one work in that profession? With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. It's Lists Dante. I must tell you, it's Friday on the Hugh Hewitt Show. So we do college football, the movies, and we do 100 Days of Dante. I joined by old friend Matt Anderson and Doug Henry. They are both professors at Baylor, and they are the brains behind a great project called 100 Days of Dante. It's its own Twitter handle, at 100, the number, Days of Dante, and a website, 100 Days of Dante. Now they have to tell you what 100 Days of Dante is about. Matt Anderson, welcome back. How are you, friend?
I'm so good. How are you, Hugh? I'm so grateful to be on the show. It's been a long time.
It has been a very long time, but it's good to talk to you again. One of my Biola Mafia, they're all around me. And Doug, good to have you join us. I gather the Biola Mafia are overrunning the Baylor campus?
Well, good morning, Hugh. They're not overrunning us, but we welcome them gladly.
All right, so Matt, you and I have done a lot of funny things over 21 years of radio. Tell us what 100 Days of Dante is. Then I'll talk to Doug, who's a real expert on Dante, about what we're going to do for 100 days. Not 100 days consecutive on the Hugh Hewitt Show, but you were doing 100 Days of Dante. Give us the setup.
Yeah, so I was teaching the Divine Comedy with undergraduates last fall, and I had a great time of it. Undergraduates resonated with the story. They, I think, got a glimpse of how reading a great text like the Divine Comedy could help them see their lives and the world around them differently. And along the way, I had this idea that I would write about the Divine Comedy, and I would write, one day per canto. It's a long poem. It's divided into 100 sections. And so I thought, I could do 100 Days of Dante. And I thought, that should just be a thing. And then I was scrolling Twitter, as one does, and I saw a tweet about Pope Francis, and Pope Francis said, this year, 2021, is the 700th anniversary of Dante's death, and he encouraged high school students, actually, to read the Divine Comedy this year. And that's when I realized, 100 Days of Dante should be a much larger thing than me just writing through it. So what we have is the world's largest reading group through the Divine Comedy. We're reading one canto only 3 days a week, so it's a sustainable pace. So we wanted to engage lots of people from lots of different contexts and audiences. And a lot of folks are busy, and one canto a day is too much. So it's 3 days a week. We started September 8th. There's still time to catch up. We go until Easter. So we're going to end on Easter Day, which for a spiritual classic like this is just a perfect rhythm. And we are delivering by email or podcast, or if you want to subscribe to YouTube, we have anywhere from 7 to 11-minute commentaries on each of the sections of the poems by faculty from Baylor University. Baylor has been driving this project, and I'm grateful to Dean Henry for making it happen. But we also have faculty from our friends at Biola, from Whitworth University, the University of Dallas, Gonzaga University, and the Templeton Honors College at Eastern University. So we've got a coalition of universities that have backed this project, and faculty who have been teaching this text for decades in some cases are going to walk through each of these cantos as though they were teaching it to an undergraduate audience. So whether you have read this poem before on your own, you've never read it, it's a text that you think that you should read, like, this is the project for you. I think it's manageable. It's really exciting. We've got 15,000 people who have signed up to do this thing in one way or another, which is a huge number. We're very excited about it. It's a really cool project.
Dean Henry, Matt just made my heart sing because he mentioned the Templeton Honors College at Eastern. That means Jack and Peanut Templeton from up above in heaven are smiling on this project. Why did Baylor get involved? I think it's great, by the way. I think it's great for homeschoolers. I think it will be accessible for high school students as well. Every English teacher who is way down on by the COVID epidemic and has not been able to prepare, what a ready-made curriculum to actually teach high school students Dante. So Dean Henry, why did Baylor throw in?
Well, Matt has a lot of energy and vision, and it was easy to be persuaded. The high school population is important. It's a program that has reached, though, to the octogenarians out there and everyone in between. Part of what inspired me, quite frankly, is the opportunity to contribute something that the world desperately needs. We could talk about great literature, and we could say the Divine Comedy, plenty of others have said this, is the greatest single work of literature ever written. We could make the case that cultural literacy calls for attention to it. But the more fundamental and motivating thing for me, quite frankly, is that I think it can make a difference in our world. We live amidst such ugliness and divisiveness. There are so many problems that attend to us today. Of course, this is true of every age. It was certainly true in Dante's age. And his poem offers an alternative to the confusion and breakdown of social fabric, to the ugliness of our world. Dostoevsky has this oft-quoted line, I'm sure you know, beauty will save the world. Dante has a line in the Divine Comedy, beauty awakens the soul to act. And I think he's exactly right. We need examples of compelling, uplifting delight that draw us toward so many good things that we lose sight of in the world. And so it's exciting for me to see this as an exercise in public humanities that can make a constructive difference precisely at this moment in our history.
Now, in the past on this show with Professor David Allen White or in the Hillsdale Dialogues or with our mutual friend John Mark Reynolds, I've tried to do a little Dante here and a little Dante there, but it is so massive an undertaking, it's just a glancing blow. So, Matt Anderson, how are you organizing this so it doesn't intimidate? You just said 3 days a week, which is great. So someone doesn't have to, and that people can catch up. That's great as well. But how are you organizing it so they can just listen to 7 to 11 minutes a day and get it?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to get a glimpse of it, right? They're going to get a little bit of taste. And you're right, it is very confusing. Dante has all of these sort of treatises on Florentine politics and who are the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. And you've got to kind of keep a flashcard around to figure out which side was which and which side Dante was on. And that can all be overwhelming. But if you can sort of just set that aside in one way, read the text, and encounter it as a literary device. I mean, the important thing about reading a text is getting from it what you can get from it, not what you should. And so we want to take people, say, from 0 to 25% in their understanding in hopes of moving them to read a few more books and go on their own from 25% to 50%. So, we've got a great set of study questions that we are providing with each one if you sign up by email or if you go to the website every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We have just phenomenal study questions that are written by a guy named Matt Moser at Azusa Pacific University. And those are meant to facilitate deeper inquiry into the text. And really one of our hopes is that people would read this together in groups through their churches or through groups of friends. We've heard from a lot of people who have formed little book groups around this. And that's also another way to drive them deeper. So, in 7 to 11 minutes, you're not going to get everything out of the text that you could get, but that's what makes it a great text, that you can keep going back to it over the course of a lifetime and always learn something new from it. And so we really want to whet people's appetite and to help them see the way in which this text actually has a moral and spiritual significance for them so that they are moved to deepen their love for God, their love for their neighbor, and their love for the world around them.
Yeah, Dean Henry, there isn't a small group in the country. That's a little Christian vernacular. People meet in small groups monthly, weekly, all over the United States. Sometimes they're married couples, sometimes they're men's groups, sometimes they're in the morning, sometimes they're in the evening, sometimes they belong to 2 or 3. And they always have the same problem. What do we do next? You know, they'll do a different book of the Bible. They'll do, for a year, they could just do 100 Days of Dante, and they would be doing a good thing. Have anyone like that turned on to 100daysofdante.com yet?
We are hearing from folks all over the country just of the sort you're describing. We've got one set of our alums up in New York who are organizing an online reading group. They did this at their own initiative, certainly with our encouragement. I think there are a couple hundred people who are participating in that particular reading group, but far more common, we're seeing folks send to the Instagram account photos of their gatherings around living room coffee tables, small groups like you're describing that are intent upon squeezing, wresting, gaining out of this great work what wisdom they can. And I'll add, every time I come to this poem, I'm brought up short. Dante writes himself into the poem. He's the author and he's a character in it. And it begins with his life in a wreck. He's lost in a dark woods. He's threatened on every side. He doesn't know what to do. He needs help. And that help arrives in the form of friends who enable him to disentangle himself from the darkness of this wood and begin to put his life back together again. And my contention is that sooner or later, all of us find ourselves at that point where Dante begins in the poem, lost, in need of help from friends. We know we can't fix things, whether in our lives, in our neighborhoods, in our world by ourselves. We need help from others. And that help, of course, is a measure of God's grace in the poem, and ultimately it is God who provides the final rescue, the elevation of Dante to heaven, and us, we might hope as well. But the friendship, the companionship, the encouragement that they find alongside each other is so much needed in all of our lives. And so there's a model here in the poem for the kind of reading community, the companionship here that these groups are themselves exemplifying.
My hat is off to both of you. And Matt, we got a minute left. I'm so glad you have met at the intersection of technology and internal need. That means for literature, but also technology. 100yearsofdante.com. I got the website right.
100daysofdante.com. That's right.
100 days. That's 100daysofdante.com. Oh my gosh.
But look, we built this thing because we want it to be there for at least 100 years or longer, right? This is one of the great things about the internet. This is a project that will endure, and we'll change the website, at the end of the project so that people will be able to sign up and redo it over the next year if they want. And so this is going to be a project that lives in perpetuity.
Well, 100daysofdante.com. The Twitter handle is 100daysofdante. I assume there's an Instagram account by the same name. Congratulations, Professor Anderson, Dean Henry from Baylor University. I appreciate your taking the time with me. That's our Friday. They'll come back, by the way. I'm going to remind people of this in different segments of the show for the next few weeks because I think it's a terrific at the intersection of technology and need, there is always success. 100daysofdante.com. Let me remind everyone out there, if you want to know when I've talked about Dante before, there's a search engine widget over at HughHewitt.com. I may do the interview with Hugh Hewitt with these guys on a longer podcast about Dante. The podcasts over the last week have been extraordinary. Andrew Sullivan and Jesse McCarthy, Harvey Mansfield, and George Will, they're all found at the interview with Hugh Hewitt at iTunes, at Spotify, at the Salem Podcast Network. Head over there. You can go look up Dante at the widget for the search engine at Salem Now over at HughHewitt.com. But if you want to listen to the podcast, there are 2 Hugh Hewitt podcasts a day. There's the short one, a highly concentrated Hugh, the Hugh Hewitt Show. First couple of segments, news of the day, that sort of stuff. And then there's the long one, the interview with Hugh Hewitt. And when you go there, the first keeps you smart, the second makes you wise. And our sponsor, ReliefFactor.com, helps keep you healthy. Now, ReliefFactor.com can't do that on its own. You've got to add exercise and good eating and all that. But it's the only supplement I take. I take my daily vitamin, and I take ReliefFactor.com. Why? I told you in the first hour when I took it. I carried in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, essential supplements for your health. support for the minor aches and pains that come with the exercise you ought to be doing every single day. I'm going to go get my booster shot today. I'm eligible. I'm going to go get it because I don't want to get the virus. But I'm also going to get my steps in probably Sunday. I've been a slug for a week because I give myself off a week every 3 months or so. And when I'm in California, except for Sunday when I was down at the beach, relieffactor.com got me through that. But it'll get me through a long airplane ride, even though I hate sitting for 6 hours coast to coast tomorrow. Relieffactor.com, $19.95 for active seniors, $19.95 for active young adults who are in sports on the weekend warrior stuff. Relieffactor.com. Coming right back with Senator Jim Talent, America. Stay tuned.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. Using California music today because of our tribute to Pete Wilson last night. Joined now by another former senator. Pete Wilson, of course, a former Senator Jim Talent. Good morning, Senator Talent. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, and I wish I could say I was a former governor, too.
Well, I want to ask you about two senators. First, I want to note the Arizona audit is over. The Maricopa County results confirmed Joe Biden won Maricopa County by pretty much the same result. I think he picked up a couple of hundred votes. No surprises here. That's behind us. That's breaking news. But the other bit of breaking news is that your colleague Chuck Grassley, with whom you served, at the age of 88, has announced he's running for re-election, and I, for one, am glad. You know, Pete Wilson's 88. We were honoring him last night on the 30th anniversary of his first year as governor of California. Those two 88-year-olds put us to shame, Jim Talent.
They do, and I'm going to tell you, they're like Chuck is what we lawyers call, and you know this better than I do, sui generis.
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, he is, every time I see Chuck, it's like the same Chuck Grassley I first met 27 years ago when I got elected to the House, who first saw, and I served with 15 years ago. The guy's incredible. He does an incredible job for Iowa, and more power to him. And I wouldn't say that normally. I mean, normally I would quietly, if somebody asked me, say, you need to think about it. He's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's always an exception to the rule. My rule is you shouldn't be in the Senate after you're 72, the John Kyle rule. Chuck Grassley is the exception because he is one of a kind. I love the History Channel rants on Twitter, right? I love that stuff. But he also takes care of Iowa. And we're going to be talking about this when he decides to run at 94 as well, by the way. He'll make his 88 county drive. He works it very hard. He takes care of Iowa first. Joni Ernst can't keep up with him. But like Pete Wilson, they were drinking the water differently when they made those two, Jim Talent. And I asked Pete Wilson last night, what makes a great senator? So I want to ask you, with Chuck Grassley in mind, what makes a great senator?
Yeah, the most important prerequisite is to have the heart of a servant, okay? And Chuck does, and Pete Wilson does. I mean, you have to be. Another really important thing, and it goes with that, is to have a dose of humble, to understand, and they both do. And then you have to stay up. You have to understand what it is you need to know to make the decisions you need to make, and you have to learn how to acquire, assimilate, and retain that information quickly.
Can I tell you what Pete said last night as well? He told a story about crossing the chairman, Bob Packwood, on a vote having to do with the television syndication rules, and he called for a roll call vote, despite Packwood saying no. And Ted Stevens behind him said, for blah, blah, blah. Pete, what are you doing? This waste of... And he won, to which he said, sometimes you just have to stand up for what you believe in the Senate. Little Jimmy Stewart moment there.
Well, absolutely. And you know what? You can do that if you have a reputation based on performance, of knowing your brief and having the courage of your convictions. In other words, if the colleagues, let's call them that, know that you're doing it because you think it's right, and that you're intelligent about how you do it, people, you not only don't hurt yourself in the body when you do that, you help yourself. I beat a chairman one time on a huge issue in the House Armed Services Committee. I mean, I like to think I was that way. And they knew it was on whether we were going to build the F-18 EMF or whether we were going to kill the program and just buy C's and D's. And it was a crazy decision that my subcommittee chairman wanted. I love him to death. But, it was wrong. And we beat him in the full committee. So, yeah, you just, again, it's doing what you think is. Now, if they think you're just showboating all the time, you get a lot of resentment. And
that brings us to today. Mitch McConnell warned everyone he would not get one vote for the debt ceiling. He told everyone, go back and amend the budget resolution, do it through reconciliation. They thought he'd blink. Mitch McConnell does not blink, Jim Talent.
No, he's the best majority leader, I think, since Bob Dole, and Mike, the best Republican leader, was the best majority leader, and I hope will be again since Bob Dole. And he's right. I mean, look, it would be simple for me. I mean, I would say, look, I'm not going to vote to raise the debt limit and support this $3.5 trillion on top of the $2 trillion they spent on this orgy of irresponsible spending. I mean, and I'd be very, very frank with them that you've already spent it all. There isn't any more left. And if you can do this on your own, do it. I'm not going to go out and call you names. I'm going to attack the policy, but I'm not going to support it. And I think that's his attitude. It's like, look, this is causing this huge inflation. It's burning the credit of the United States, and it's not buying anything that people care about. I'm not going to support it. I mean, I think that's his attitude.
It is his attitude, and Nancy Pelosi blinked yesterday. They're going to take the continuing resolution back, strip the debt limit out of it, begin to amend the budget resolution so they can use a reconciliation process to do it with 51 votes, including the vice president. Good for Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, and good for you, Jim Talent, for joining me on a Friday. It's not your regular day. I appreciate that. I'll be right back, America. The last hour of the radio week. The Hillsdale Dialogue is straight ahead live right here. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show on a Friday.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show, the Dennis Prager Show.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world.
I love that. We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. That's not true. We've ended 20 years of American troops in Afghanistan. We have not ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. I wish we did. The Taliban has taken over. That is exactly that would be like saying if Churchill had decided not to fight Hitler any longer. Well, we've ended all these years of conflict with Germany. Except when you have tyrants in charge, violent tyrants, you have not ended conflict. You have only ended your role in it. It shows the statement is fascinating. It's so incorrect that it really demands explanation. Why would somebody say something so incorrect? We have not ended 20 years of conflict. We have ended 20 years of American engagement, or at least direct engagement. And that is because basically most people, and I even include a lot of conservatives, really don't give a damn about Afghans. Something I've never quite understood. I am forthright about this. I think America should be the world's policeman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
How many years did you have at ICE and DHS?
Just under 35.
35 years. In your service of almost 4 decades, was there any locale in America where 15,000 illegal aliens were under a bridge? That's my first question.
Absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Okay. Second question. Was there ever a case where a bus was taken over by illegal immigrants and the illegal immigrants escaped off the bus in mass numbers?
No, absolutely not.
So those two things alone surely would count as a crisis.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America. This is not we're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback with reins, trying to pretend, making this effort to make you think that Border Patrol agents are slave masters, whipping the poor Haitian people who are just here looking for a better life. There needs to be an investigation about the Border Patrol agent on horseback, as if the Border Patrol agents aren't already bone-weary, overwhelmed, threatened, and in an impossible job. How'd you like to be married to a Border Patrol agent today? How'd you like to have a dad, a mom, a loved one work in that profession? With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars. Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it.
Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. On this September 24th from California, the Hillsdale Dialogue is live. I'm Hugh Hewitt. This week, Dean Matt Spalding of the Graduate School of Statesmanship of Hillsdale College inside the Beltway in the belly of the beast. Good morning, Dean Spalding. How are you? Thank you for joining me early in the morning.
Good morning, Hugh. I'm great, and good to talk with you.
I have
Greetings from Hillsdale campus.
I have a very interesting approach to this week. Normally, the Hillsdale Dialogue is a deep dive, but you are running the Graduate School on Statesmanship, so I'm going to actually treat you not the scholar you are, but as an analyst would be treated this week, and run through some of the current issues, asking for your response as a scholar of the Constitution as to what is going on. It's sort of like constitutional jeopardy, since we are in constitutional jeopardy. The first thing I want to ask you about, the very first thing, is Alexander Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. On CNN with Wolf Blitzer, Secretary Mayorkas says this in the middle of a border crisis, cut number 7.
The special U.S. envoy to Haiti resigned today, as you well know, saying, and I'll read a quote from his resignation letter, I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants. Mr. Secretary, how do you respond to the charge that the Biden administration, that the policy of the administration is inhumane and counterproductive?
Well, first of all, let me say that we don't use the term illegal immigrants. I actually issued a policy in the Department of Homeland Security. We use the term non-citizen to respect the dignity of every individual as a preliminary matter.
So I want to begin there, Dean Spalding, because it's the substitution of mindless rhetoric for a policy difference. What did you make of that response and about the border crisis?
Well, I mean, it's always hard to know where to start with these things. There is so much going on here. I think one of the first things we need to do is kind of step back and look from a higher perspective as to what is going on here. And this is actually a good example of that. He immediately dived down into minor points, seemingly changing language to reposition the issue.
Yes.
But in doing so, we need to keep an eye on what is actually happening here. And these two things have in this case have come together. That is his rhetoric and reality. And indeed, many of the things that's been going on the last few weeks are showing us what political reality is really about. And he's made this point about, well, we don't call them illegal immigrants, we call them non-citizens, which, of course, that rhetoric itself points to the precise problem, which is if you've lost control of your borders and there are different groups from different countries coming in large numbers. We don't know what to do with them. They're getting shipped all over the place. You've actually no longer are controlling the terms by which one could or could not, may or may not become a citizen. That distinction is inherent for any sovereign nation. It's inherent in sovereignty. And in a constitutional republic in which we do allow citizens, in which the nation really defines the idea that anyone could become a citizen, if you've lost control of it completely, you have a complete breakdown of the rule of law, so changing the terminology in this odd way that he did actually points to the problem.
I also want to point out that going back to the framers, Matt Spalding, you're an expert in the Constitution. They had a specific citizenship requirement for the presidency, though it was waived early in the Republic's years, allegedly, so that Alexander Hamilton would be eligible one day to become president. But they insisted that citizens be born in the United States. Now, you can become a naturalized citizen, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Arnold could not run for the presidency because of the explicit terms of the Constitution. Even if he had been electable, he could not have run by the terms of the Constitution. Why do you think the framers did that, and why make that an article in the new document governing the republic?
Great question. Goes back to the broader distinction between this country and virtually every other country in the world, which is that for most nations, the legitimacy of your country comes from your bloodline, your ethnicity, your religion, or some deep tradition going back thousands of years. The reason America is different, and this is actually one of the points we are debating today, which is why all these debates point back to this original question. This nation begins by saying that all men are created equal. That is recognizing that each human person has a dignity as a human being and has equal rights. That said, we are a particular nation. We have a universal principle, but a particular nation. How do you resolve the two? You can only resolve it through a process of constitutional government, rules and laws, but one key aspect of that is to allow for non-citizens to come into the country and become citizens. So that idea of assimilation is actually central to the American purpose, which means these various distinctions about the requirements for the presidency, the requirements for becoming a citizen, maintaining control of the border, determining who does and does not get asylum. Those concepts, which some are now saying violate, humanity and are mean-spirited, are actually crucially important to allowing this democratic republic to actually have a very robust and generous immigration system. But you've got to control it so that you can have a legitimate process so people can do that.
Now, Matt Spalding, what happens to the rule of law when law is so visibly suspended? And not merely suspended, but mocked. And I do not doubt the human dignity. I'm a Catholic of the Haitians crossing the river looking for a better life, thousands of them having walked from Chile. It's a tragedy. It's a testament to courage and valor, but it is also a suspension of law. What is the effect of that on the general public when they see the law disregarded?
Oh, this is devastating. Indeed, many of the things that are going on right now in Congress, this, elsewhere, all really point to a general breakdown of the rule of law. We think of the rule of law as a very technical thing, a lawyerly approach to issues as opposed to being humane. But actually, the rule of law, that is the rule by which, rather than individual men and arbitrary decisions rule things, there's a agreed upon rule that sets up the terms by which we rule ourselves and self-govern. The breakdown of that is devastating. Remember the stories about crime in New York City, the broken windows theory. As soon as you allow the breakdown around the edges, it actually creeps its way back up. And when we see around us, the president or Congress or national leaders getting around or subverting the law or not following the process or ignoring it, what signal does that send down the chain, including to people around the world who want to come here for good reasons, but see an opening to completely ignore the law, to which we can then add, what about all those people who may be coming in with them that actually have criminal purposes and are terrorists and others that might actually threaten us. They see that opening too. But so it runs the whole gamut.
So I want to bring up, we have a mutual friend, John Eastman. He's been on the show many times, wrote a very controversial memo during the post-election challenge by President Trump. And I think he proposed an illegal thing. I think he did it as a hypothetical as a lawyer. I haven't talked to John about it, but he proposed setting aside the Electoral College Act, and I would not have agreed with that, and indeed Mike Pence rejected it. But everybody who's up in arms over the Eastman memo are silent about the border. Do you know, Matt, if you're going to defend the rule of law, you have to defend it against John and against the Biden administration. You have to actually defend it everywhere and at all times.
No, that's right. And one of the to get out of the opposite problem, which is to have the rule of law so strict that you can't actually get things done, that points us back to the beauty of the American system, whereby you have three branches of government and checks and balances in a court and a legislature, division between the federal government and the state governments. But the undergirding, the thing that undergirds all of that at the base, the real accomplishment, if you will, of the American founding and the development of British constitutional law into America is this idea that there is a due process, a rule of law that we all must abide by, and that goes in all cases, and you can't merely ignore it when it's in your political self-interest.
You can't pick and choose. You have to either say we're in, and I am, and so Matt Spalding, and so is Hillsdale, and that's why the Hillsdale Dialogue is on every Friday in the last radio hour of the week, and will continue after this. Please stay tuned.
Now, the most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened.
It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate, the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather. Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it, the left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the death. So you guys got me here. There's a differentiation here. There are people that are actually dying from COVID itself. Okay? Got it. And then there's people that may be dying of some other condition, but they may have tested positive for COVID. Perhaps they were even asymptomatic. Nonetheless, these people are getting registered as COVID-19 deaths when it isn't COVID that caused it. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There are some...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Matt Spalding is the Dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School of Statesmanship inside the Beltway. It is the Hillsdale Dialogue. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu, including all of the Hillsdale Dialogues dating up to 10 years now at hughforhillsdale.com. Matt Spalding, I want to play for you an exchange at the White House yesterday on immigration between Yamiche Alcindor, representing the Fourth Estate, PBS, publicly funded broadcast, and Jen Psaki, the White House flacking for the president. Cut number 11.
Also said in his letter, he called the U.S. policy inhumane, deeply flawed. Does the president believe anything in this letter that Daniel Foote is saying rings true, has some sort of point that he believes is true?
Which aspect?
He called the policy toward Haiti inhumane. He said that
he wasn't specific in his letter. What I noted earlier before, let me finish, Yamiche. What I noted earlier before is that we have taken very specific actions as it relates to the horrific photos that we're not going to stand for in this administration. I don't know if he was referring to that or something else. That's why I raised the point. His purview. Let me finish, Yamiche. His purview was not about migration. He didn't raise his concerns about migration privately. We respect his point of view, respect his ability to bring forward concerns, to raise ideas, to raise proposals. That's certainly something the president welcomes from everybody on his team and something that he had the opportunity to do in a range of meetings. We also have to make decisions here based on what we feel are going to help promote democracy in Haiti, including Haitian-led reforms, Haitian-led steps on the ground to make changes in the country.
A number of people who say that he did raise concerns over the deportation of Haitians and the treatment of Haitians. Are you saying then that Daniel Foote is not telling the truth in this letter?
I would point you to the State Department, who have conveyed clearly in their statement what I just said.
One last question, I promise. Yeah. The last question is, Daniel Foote, the former special envoy to Haiti, he's raising this idea that the U.S. should be listening to Haitian civil society, not backing the current prime minister who was not elected by the people. What's the president's response to that? Because those civil society members have been telling me and other reporters for months, even before the assassination of the president, that President Biden was not listening to the people of Haiti about how to move forward with their government.
We support a Haitian-led process charting the country's course through the current political situation. We don't back any one.
Stop right there. So
group,
Matt Spalding, I played this out. It's so interesting on many levels. But at the very end there, Yamiche Alcindor says, is the president listening to the people of Haiti? The United States has a system where the people are represented by a constitutional structure. I thought that was interesting, but I don't think either of them knew the significance of the question. That they're talking about governance. They're talking about the rule of law, and Haiti doesn't have it.
Yeah, there are. I mean, again, there are so many things in that exchange. There are several things I thought that made for confusion. That one in particular, is the president listening to the people of Haiti? But the other one was there was this broad distinction between policy on the one hand and particular circumstances. Setting aside the the particular people involved here, we're not very good at thinking through politics in a way that we ought to within a constitutional system, in terms of the role of the president, in terms of policy making, in terms of the role of Congress, and that I think points to it. I think in a lot of these cases, what we're seeing, and this goes for mandates and the other issues of the day, is the rule of law is essentially being set aside as a secondary matter, as a speed bump, if you will, as we move towards what we want to have as our policy outcome, no matter what. We'll use the courts if need be, or we won't. We will sue the states, or we won't. We will use Congress, or we won't, in order to achieve our outcome. And so the framework
and the media will message. The media will message regardless of the story.
That's right. And so no longer do we speak in terms of roles and responsibilities of a president, a Congress, or a governor as to how we think this through. And that lack of a framework, I fear, is moving us towards a condition, which is precisely what the American founding was moving against, was that all sovereignty does not get subsumed into a central force which can become arbitrary.
And it should have been, the question should have been, is the president listening to the people of the United States as expressed through the laws of their legally elected representatives with regards to the border and the Haitians who are crossing illegally? That was the question. The people of Haiti, my goodness. Matt Spalding, the dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School, will be right back. Stay tuned to the Hillsdale Dialogue.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she? This is what she's upset about.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way. And I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters. And we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
This is like right out of a comic book or a movie or a novel about an inept, comical, egregiously corrupt administration. You're going to investigate the Border Patrol agent on the horse? What are you still looking for the root cause of the problem, Kamala? Are you still looking for that? She's a little bit like O.J. Simpson looking for Nicole's killer on the golf courses of Las Vegas. He's still on that search, for the real killer of Nicole and Ron Goldman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah. For a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is to secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this. and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of green are looking at him as their boss and wait a minute. We're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put
120,000 Afghans were evacuated through Kabul airport last month, and still the Biden administration now acknowledges that most of the Afghans that America had promised to rescue were left behind. Without troops or diplomats on the ground in Afghanistan, it's not clear how the U.S. can help them. And as NPR's Quill Lawrence reports, even the Afghans who were rescued face an uncertain future.
Thousands of U.S. troops made promises to Afghans.
Future.
lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live in California. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. My counterpart is Dean Matt Spalding, Dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School of Statesmanship, inside the Beltway, in the heart of the belly of the beast. I'm on the West Coast. Matt Spalding is on the East Coast this morning. We're talking about the rule of law, and I'm using a few clips to illustrate the crisis that we are in. This is Trey Yingst on Fox with Dana Perito reporting from Kabul, where America has deserted not only American citizens and LPRs, but tens of thousands of Afghans to whom they had made a promise of repatriation to the United States. The report, cut number 2.
Dana, good morning. There are thousands of U.S. green card holders stuck in Afghanistan, along with Afghans who worked at the U.S. Embassy. These are their stories.
Yes, I have a green card and my daughter have U.S. passport, and also my wife also, she's a green card holder. I live in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. I run 2 businesses in Georgia.
Dulat is an American resident and U.S. taxpayer. He came to visit his family before the Taliban took control and is now one of thousands of U.S. green card holders stuck in Afghanistan. David Scott.
Yeah, David Scott's congressman.
The office of U.S. Congressman David Scott told him to come to this hotel today and tried to get on an evacuation convoy and flight with the Qataris. So far, he's had no luck. It's not just green card holders who are unable to escape. There are a number of people outside of this hotel in Kabul who worked for the Americans at the U.S. Embassy, and they're left behind. They have the documentation. It says U.S. Embassy, Kabul.
I work more than 4 years, and some my friends was 12 years.
I'm Fazli Abdul Sattar, and one of the employee of the U.S. Embassy as a security screener.
This is from the deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, promising these embassy workers they would get them out of Afghanistan.
We are live behind here with families, with all the U.S. Embassy staff are here right now.
Some of the people you saw in that...
This goes on quite long. It's a long report. The United States walked out on its citizens, its green card holders, its legal permanent residents, and its SIV applicants, as well as the people who relied on it. What does that say about the United States?
I think it actually says many things. This has been a complete and utter disaster. But I would say what strikes me the most is the radical disjunction between our country's responsibilities, duties, agreements to citizens and those we worked with, those who were allies with us, rubbing up against what turns out to be, in hindsight, a largely political decision to be out of that country by a date certain. That is one aspect of good thinking, of statesmanship, if you will, is to think strategically and to take into consideration the circumstances and your outcome, but you can't ignore all these other aspects. A great country does not do things that are clearly against its own interest when they had an easy option not to do it differently. It doesn't abandon its citizens. It used to be that this was the most important thing. We don't leave people behind. And we don't signal allies and future friends who we might need to help us in future conflicts. This is how we treat them. So I think it was disaster on every front. We can argue about the war prior to it, what should have been left there, perhaps holding an air base for intelligence purposes. But the forced withdrawal and how it was done, and the fact that it was advised against but done for a political reason, I think, has led to this disaster, complete disaster, by which we abandon our citizens in there. At the same time, in your previous clip, we're making distinctions between citizens and non-citizens who are easily walking into the country with no rule of law at home.
And have you noticed, Dean Spalding, that the full faith and credit of the United States, Democrats are yelling at Republicans that the Republicans are endangering the full faith and credit of the United States? I'm about to move to that. They do not seem to understand that the full faith of the credit of the United States was far more on the line in Kabul with these people than it is in a budget debate in Congress. And I just want to know, full faith and credit is not an economic term. It's actually a term of reliance upon the sovereign power of the United States as embodied in the Constitution. And we failed in Afghanistan on the full faith and credit promises we made to these people.
No, I think that's absolutely right, and that's a great point. I mean, when we speak about the rule of law and full faith and credit, remember when we're dealing with other nations, these are nations that do not have with us the same rule of law, and so the rule of law that we show to other nations through our economics and trading, but also through how we treat them and how we treat our friends and our enemies, for that matter, and the full faith and credit of the country outside of the country is how we abide by agreements, how we carry out our responsibilities. And so that's much more strategically important than this narrow debate right now, which is merely political maneuvering to prevent a division within their own caucus. It's a very narrow-minded argument that I think that is being made about what that actually means today.
And a very important argument, which you just referenced, is how do we treat our friends? Here's Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib on the House floor yesterday talking about our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, cut number 4.
I rise in opposition to this supplemental. I will not support an effort to enable and support war crimes, human rights abuses, and violence. We cannot be talking only about Israelis' need for safety at a time when Palestinians are living under a violent apartheid system and are dying from what Human Rights Watch has said are war crimes. We should also be talking about Palestinian need for security from Israeli attacks. We must be consistent in our commitment to human life, period. Everyone deserves to be safe there. The bill claims to be, quote, a replenishment for weapons apartheid Israel used in a crisis it manufactured when it attacked worshippers at one of the most holiest Islamic locations, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, committing, again, numerous war crimes. And yet, a $1 billion in American tax dollars that my colleagues want to give represents, to me, an absurd and unjustifiable 140 times increase to U.S. funding for the Iron Dome. I firmly believe our country must oppose selling weapons to anyone, anywhere, without human rights law compliance. The Israeli government is an apartheid regime. Not my words, the words of Human Rights Watch and Israel's own Human Rights
Spalding,
Watch.
Chuck Fleischman of Tennessee, a Republican, rose to respond to this. Cut number 5.
Mr. Speaker, The truth has finally come out on the floor of the House of the United States of America. I heard some of my Democratic colleagues stand with me, with Israel, with our ally, to fight terrorism with a defensive weapon system. And what did we just hear? We heard the Democratic Party speak out. We heard right now from my colleague across the aisle with a shocking statement. She opposes this because they have a vocal minority in the majority party that is anti-Israel, that is anti-Semitic, and as Americans, we can never stand for that. I grew up with Holocaust survivors. I grew up with children of Holocaust survivors. Israel has been attacked and attacked and attacked since its inception. As Americans, I beseech you, I reach out to the majority and I say, condemn what we just heard on the floor. Condemn
Spalding, this is a vigorous debate about an important subject, but attacks on our friends, not standing by them, originated within the Democratic Party, and I don't think are going to be forgotten by the American electorate for a long time.
No, I don't think so. And this was in the larger resolution. It was then taken out and done as a standalone bill, and they lost significantly in a vote. This is a great example of political reality hitting home. These are the kind of debates we should have in Congress, to be honest. Congress should be debating these things, and we should be making our decisions. But the idea that we should not keep in mind who our friends and enemies are in the world and who are citizens and non-citizens, and these very simple political distinctions that legislators and statesmen must make is patently absurd. The problem is that in many of these things we're seeing right now are showing the extent to which the Democratic caucus is increasingly led by a very small minority in a very radical direction.
So all of these subjects, Matt Spalding, the rhetoric of the Secretary of DHS, illegal immigrant, we don't use that anymore. The exchange between the White House press secretary and the PBS reporter, which is otherworldly. The exchange on the floor of the Senate, the SIV holders who've been abandoned. They all have in common one thing. They all call into question America's commitment to the rule of law. And I'm beginning to wonder, do you really think it exists anymore?
I think it exists, especially on paper. I think it exists in most places. I think we're seeing a move in this direction. It's been going on for a while, and I think it's gotten more apparent now in the current administration, precisely because I think the caucus, the party caucus of the administration, is so pulled in a more radical direction that does not wish to abide by the rule of law. Put another way, all the things we've referenced here, including others, the mandates, the questions about redistricting that are going on right now, every one of them pushes against majority rule. It undercuts the rule of law, but in its place, it implies that majorities, which is, say, lawmaking majorities, legislative majorities, voting majorities, those don't matter. All that matters is the outcome where we want to push policy. In the case of Congress, where we want to push policy despite an extremely narrow majority in the House and no majority in the Senate, except with a tie-breaking vote, and it just the extent to which they're pushing that hard, I think, has this deep effect on the rule of law and significantly undermines it and shows that they don't think there's a rule of law. And I think others, Republicans, governors, citizens who are getting involved in things, need to stand up for the rule of law, because really that is the bedrock of our system, which allows us to have disagreements and debates like this in Congress and then have decisions about how we move forward for the common good of the nation.
We're going to come back and talk about redistricting in just a moment. Matt just hit on a profound thing here. It's really about the rule of an elite pretending to be in the rule of the majority and speaking for the majority, but using that pretense to overturn the rule of law as embedded in the Constitution and the law. It's really about the rule of a bureaucratic elite and a very small minority of hard left fanatics within one party that is driving that party. We'll come back and talk about redistricting in just a moment. Let me remind you, all things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu, including an application to the college for your senior in high school who's looking for a genuine place to learn. Whatever their calling, whatever their study, Hillsdale is a great place to go. All of the Hillsdale Dialogues, HughForHillsdale.com, but all things Hillsdale, including great courses on the Constitution and the Progressive Movement at HughForHillsdale.com. Don't forget, ReliefFactor.com as well is a terrific sponsor of this show. ReliefFactor.com, $19.95 gets you started. $19.95 will get you a 3-week starter supply. I took it this morning in the first hour, as I have all week during my California week, which comes to an end in the morning, back to the East Coast to the swamp, where it's fall and it's actually kind of beautiful to be. I'll be back in October for the Nixon Foundation's Architect of Peace Award dinner. But I got my Relief Factor in, and I want to remind all of you who have not yet signed up, join the tens of thousands of people who take it every single morning, like I do, because they want to feel their best throughout the entire day. The only supplement I take, $19.95, gives you a 3-week starter pack. You can try it for yourself and decide whether you're a young athlete or an older active senior. Try ReliefFactor.com. Dean Matt Spalding coming right back in the last segment of today's Hillsdale Dialogue.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are two things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policemen, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah, that's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe! Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
How many years did you have at ICE and DHS?
Just under 35.
35 years. In your service of almost 4 decades, was there any locale in America where 15,000 illegal aliens were under a bridge? That's my first question.
Absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Okay. Second question. Was there ever a case where a bus was taken over by illegal immigrants and the illegal immigrants escaped off the bus in mass numbers?
No, absolutely not.
So those two things alone surely would count as a crisis.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The last radio hour of the week is the Hillsdale Dialogue every week. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. For 10 years, all the conversations I had with Dean Matt Spalding, who's my guest today, or Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale, or one of their colleagues, are all collected at hughforhillsdale.com. And today we're closing with a discussion about redistricting, because yesterday I had on former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, co-chair of the National Republican Redistricting Trust, to talk about redistricting. Matt Spalding teaches the Constitution at the graduate school, Hillsdale's Graduate School of Statesmanship. Matt, what is the law of redistricting? What did the framers intend, and what do we need to know as we go into this every 10-year process?
Well, let me make a broad point first, tying us back to this rule of law question. Why do we have the rule of law? It was to prevent arbitrary power, potential despotism, making decisions in the hands of one person, and you divide that up in different ways. One is you divide the governments themselves into branches of government: Congress, executive, judiciary, and there we're seeing more and more power as Congress either gives up its power or pushes it towards the administrative branch under the executive. But the other great division, of course, is between the federal government and the state governments. And that is crucially important, and we're increasingly seeing moves towards centralization going on for some time. This is a key component of that conversation. The division between the federal government and the state governments is crucially important. The federal government has certain powers in the Constitution, and they should have those powers extremely important to have those powers, and they have them completely. And there's room for making more decisions, and it's mostly should be done through the legislature. But there are many key things that were left to the states, and they're inherently state issues. One of those is how to organize and how to deal with elections, and how do you draw congressional districts. And I believe just in the last couple of years, the Supreme Court once again said that drawing lines for districts is a political question, and it's inherently a question for state legislatures. And the debate we're seeing right now, and why this is crucially important, is getting control of that in some sort of centralized way, either through political maneuvers with a party, or in the case of H.R. 1, where you have legislation to pull all that under the control of the federal government, undermines that crucial activity, breaks down that aspect of the rule of law. And if you take away the ability to draw districts at the local level with state legislatures, you've taken an inherently political question, which should be done at that level where those political decisions can safely be made, and yet now you've made them centralized, highly partisanized questions, which serve not the good of those legislative majorities at the state level. They serve a narrow partisan objective. And I think that's the context in which this debate is occurring.
Now, the 14th Amendment empowered the United States Supreme Court to make two interventions. One, to insist that every legislative district have an equal number of people in it. That's Baker v. Carr and Reynolds v. Sim in combination. They both rule that the United States, any body that redistricts, must have the same number, one person, one vote, the same voting strength. That was an imposition on redistricting. The next is that race may not be used in any context, in any drawing of line, unless it is under the 14th Amendment, Article 5 authority to address prior civil rights violations such as embodied in the Voting Rights Act. Beyond that, it's a political process. I do not like these redistricting commissions, Matt. I think they're unconstitutional. But as long as they're going to be there, they ought not to be false flags for nonpartisanship when they're, in fact, Democratic partisans. And the rule is, where the Democrats get to draw the districts, they draw them to favor themselves, New York, Illinois, California. And where the Republicans have the majority in Florida and Texas and Ohio, they do it for them. And thus has it always been, and thus it will always be, because politics cannot be taken out of the rule of law. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And I agree with you about the commissions. The commissions are unconstitutional. But let's think about it in the terms we've been discussing here. Those commissions are really the another version of kind of an administrative bureaucratic body, which has been given this authority on the grounds that somehow they're going to be impartial. But But of course, that's not the case. This is one of the problems with the bureaucratic state. You can't get rid of politics. Politics are inherent in what it means to be human. We are political beings. We make political decisions. The safe way to deal with that is not to put it in the hands of bureaucrats, but to leave that in the hands of legislatures, because we can't get rid of commissions if we don't like what they've done, but we can elect new legislatures. It's an inherently political question. You can't remove that. This is one of the deep flaws of kind of the progressive theory of administration, that somehow we can be scientific and have experts do these things. It's an inherently political question. It needs to remain a political question. There are some rules. You mentioned those constitutional rules, but in general it should be compact districts and things like that. But we must leave it in politics because the people, through their elections, the rule of law, can still control politics.
And we will use the Hillsdale Dialogue every week to talk about the will of the people as expressed through their elected representatives being the genius of the framers and the genius of our rule of law. Matt Spalding, Dean of the Graduate School of Hillsdale in Washington, D.C., thank you. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back inside the Beltway on Monday when we are next live, back with you on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.